Well, listen, I know it's not indicative of how everything is going to go, but one of the most vivid memories I have from playing in Colts in the UK, we were, I don't know, I think in the National Colts Cup we got to like last 32. So we were good, we weren't amazing, and Colts is obviously 17 to 19, and we had an American college team come over to play us on tour, which obviously they were a few years older because you can be up to 23 in that environment. And they got off the bus and we were like, fucking hell, we're going to get murdered here. And bro, we beat them 90-0.
Yeah, it's something that we're obviously going to touch on in the pod.
Yeah,
but like limitations to S&C, it's so funny that like it's the actual people in S&C that are saying about the limitations, and then everyone else is just goes a bit crazy on that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's I think when you look at the USA as well, they love to say how good their athletes are, but they, if you look at the sevens team, even the sevens team that is like now actually up there with the best in the world, the vast majority of those players in the sevens squad have been playing from a young age, and then they've just got world-class environments, which is not how most other countries treat their sevens programs. So they've got the athletes, they've got the access, and then but they've got most of their players are actually they're not taken up when they're 25. Most of them, like obviously you've got your Carlin Isles, but outside of that, most of them are actually like youth players. And that's why they've got the success. Anyway,
well, it's just one of those games. It's just one of those games where you can get away with it.
Oh, so much more than 15s.
Yeah.
So much more than 15s. Anyway, I've hit record.
Well, I mean, he played like second team for. Oh yeah, sorry.
It's all good. I hit record like just when you started, because I usually just chime it in. It's not like people are going to click this podcast and go, "Oh, who's Keir, the rugby strength coach?" Like I think they know who you are, so it's all good.
They will in America.
But I mean, in general, I've done this with all the podcasts recently. It's just like, you do the long intros, but they clicked on the bloody podcast title with your name on it. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I guess for the people that don't know who you are, any cliff notes or how would you sum up who you are and what you do in 1 to 2 sentences?
So these days I'm primarily I'm kind of on a little bit of a crusade to try and unfuck coach education in strength and conditioning.
Beautiful. Yeah. Because obviously I know, like when I first started following your work, like really in depth, I knew like I already had my 8 UKSCA stuff.
Yeah.
I was balls deep in the Olympic lifts and everything because that was so important. And then I just saw you like just question it with just like general logic, and there's no real answer to it. And then they just still keep spouting out the same stuff. And then it seems like it's similar stuff to what the was put out in the US as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things to it. One is, if you criticize the UKSCA, and I pick on the UKSCA because I'm English. If you pick on them and say, this is, they'll say, this is the gold standard of education, and you say, okay, well, why are there so many bad coaches that have the UKSCA? It's clearly not an indicator of coaching quality or a guarantee of a positive outcome with athletes. That's, the reply will be, oh, well, it's just a driving license. And then I would say, okay, does a driving license cost, $1,000 to obtain? And also, does the DVLA also sell driving lessons? I think there's a conflict of interest at the heart of the UKSCA where they're erecting a barrier to entry for coaches and then selling supposed solutions to jump over that barrier. And to me, when you're controlling both sides of the market, that's not good. And the few people within the UKSCA where if you say, hang on, this is not good. This is not a guarantee of coaching quality or predicting success. Like, for example, other fields like dental surgery. If somebody is a DDS next to their name, you would quite happily go and get a filling from them, or let them put an injection in your mouth. So, or if somebody's called a captain and they're in charge of a jet, you're pretty confident they're going to be able to land the thing.
Right.
So the fact that other professions can do it, but we can't do it yet, suggests that there's a big gap that needs to be filled. So that the minority of people within the system, where you point that out and they'll say, okay, we can change. Really, my understanding is, speaking to people that are on the inside, is that the assessment fundamentally has not changed in the last 10 years plus.
Jeez.
So it's one thing to admit it behind closed doors, but then to actually do something about it is another thing. And I think there's a couple of things that are preventing that. One is, like I said, when you position yourself as the only game in town, and I'm sure they want to keep it that way, you don't have to listen to anyone. So they have a monopoly right now on accreditation within the UK, and monopolies in general. I can't think of a monopoly that benefits the consumer in any walk of life. The monopoly benefits whoever has the monopoly. And I've had conversations with people where they say, "Oh, you're welcome to compete with the UKSCA. It's a free market and blah blah blah." But it's like, no, it's not, because you're writing the test. So if we're competing to reverse engineer the test and to come up with better ways to educate coaches to navigate that process, and you have the answers to the test, it's not a free market. But it is what it is.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like if they want to actually have like progress and stuff, and that's just generally how science works. And I think with strength and conditioning, like the and coaching sciences, they're developing at such a rapid rate that you're going to have to admit that you are wrong about so much shit. I think over the, like, if you look on a 10-year radius, maybe not like over like once you get enough skin in the game, rarely do you make a big 180 turn within 1 year. But like if you look over what people were saying 10, 20 years ago, things are completely different. And to say that they haven't even changed the testing in that long, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, fair enough.
Because they don't have to listen.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's literally just no need. Yeah, it's like forced accountability is just not something that you need to do if you're a monopoly, I guess. And it is a shame. But it's also like, I think when you look at the UKSCA, you have people that are UKSCA accredited. Like for the general public, not outside of like top clubs and stuff, for the general consumer, like someone that just wants, an individual athlete that wants someone to coach them, they don't like it's absolutely mind-blowing that they would genuinely consider many options and not even worry about having the letters at the end of the name, whereas you would never go to a dentist that didn't have a dental whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? I think it's like every I kind of tell people every man on earth thinks they do three things above the average, which is drive, fucking fight. And if you work in sport, anyone that has ever picked up a ball thinks they know how to train athletes.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest things. I can't remember where I saw it in rugby. It's like they were saying that some of the biggest problems with rugby is that it's just ex-players that are coaching. And, it's some of the things that it's always been the problem. One of the biggest issues in the PT industry is that people that are just generally in good shape and like to train end up being PTs, and they have no way to relate to people that are the opposite. So yeah, it's so weird.
There are advantages to it. Fundamentally, unless you work in North Korea, everything you're doing is sales, right? So you have to convince people to take certain courses of action, which in the long term are good for them, but might not be palatable in the short term. And that works in both private sector training and sports. And, you know, certainly you're a more credible salesman when your professional background is like hitting all the human biases of like social proof, you know, authority, like all that kind of stuff. So it can make you a much more effective practitioner if you then have the theory and the logic and the rationale behind it. But when you have that reputation and you're given the keys to the kingdom immediately, there's not a lot of incentive to go after and do it. I mean, there are people out there that exist that do that, but yeah, like you said, it's a cliche for a reason.
Yeah, I used to always think about like it's a reason why probably Wayne Rooney wouldn't be the best coach in the world, because he was such a good player, but mostly like just on instinct.
Of course,
same thing, right?
Because you know when you're an elite performer, I'll give you a real example. You know, I worked with a tennis athlete at Richmond. She was, you know, by no means, you know, up there in terms of like national rankings. She's probably never going to go pro, but in terms of, you know, relative to normal people, she's elite. And she said to me once, "I don't get what's so hard. Just hit the ball." And when you're dealing with, you know, athletes that are so gifted, they don't actually have to think about that, to then be able to like break down the process, to take what's in your head and put it in somebody else's, and to have that kind of like systems mindset and develop people that don't have that ability, that's where it breaks down. So you tend to see that it's, you know, average players, average coaches, the ones that didn't get it naturally, that had to think about what they're doing, that tend to be the best coaches. So you look at like Bill Belichick, Alex Ferguson, who else? You know, Eddie Jones, Faraz Sahabi. They're all good, but they were never great.
Absolutely, yeah. And then it goes. You still have to achieve something. You know, it's you still wouldn't want like a real fat personal trainer.
No. I mean, the first bite is with the eye.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing I'm seeing at the minute. People keep asking me about this the Kneesovertoes guy. I'm sure you've heard of him and probably had a bunch of questions about him as well. It's like he's got really popular, and he does mention in a few of his videos that his mentor was Charles Poliquin. You can really see it. Like, it's not that he has bad ideas. Most of his ideas are actually really good, and the way he trains is pretty decent. But it's all like, it's a sales system more than it is anything else, which is, you know, if it's similar to CrossFit,
absolutely.
I guess.
I know for a fact that,
go on,
you know, of every dollar he generates, another 20% of that dollar goes back into advertising and marketing.
Yeah. And like he makes cool videos. Like, it's a good system, but it's so in like the way he's got people's interest and intrigue is a very similar thing to Poliquin. You know, it's like there's a good amount of science to it, but then you know, it's the rest. You know, it's sciencey looking marketing, I guess, and it's better than nothing.
Absolutely,
but it's not the best.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at you know, like business, he's probably hit the sweet spot, which is if you do want to be highly individualized, tailor-made, not to make those kind of like scientific missteps, you're going to have to be inherently non-scalable with what you do, and you're never going to find enough people that will pay enough money to match the revenue that he has now. But at the same time, you know, if he just waters it down to such a point where it's just, you know, it's just garbage training, again, people won't buy into it and pay the money. So, you know, $50 a month, 5,000 people on the list paying that, you know, that's $250,000 a month. So he's managed the sweet spot. He's got something that's inherently scalable, that has a lot of holes in it, but clearly the message resonates. And for the 5,000 people that pay, clearly for at least some of the time, it's worth it to them.
Yeah, and again, it's it's good enough, and that's all it needs to be, really. I guess it's better, or it's better than what people are doing on their own, which is, I guess that's a good starting point for us on our actual questions that I had listed out. Is like people that sort of start on their own. It's so easy just to get them moving and to get them to have like a lot of progress, but they always get tempted by what the elite guys are doing and all this sort of stuff. But is that like, how would you plan it for someone that's not even ever done much in the gym that wants to improve their rugby performance?
Specifically in the gym?
Yeah, let's go. Let's say specifically they want to. No, actually, we don't say it has to be in the gym. It has to say they want it. They've got time to train 3 to 5 times a week,
and they're already training with a team.
Yeah, let's say that.
Okay, well, if you kind of like go to the 30,000 foot view, this, I'm reading a great book at the moment called Mental Models. It's like by Farnham Street. It talks about one of the mental models is first principles. So every idea, you just keep break it down until you get to like the root of what is it that you're trying to do.
Isn't that related to like, is it like the 6 whys or something?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So the root, what's the point of rugby? To win. Okay. So, how do you win? Well, you score more points in attack, you do in defense. Okay, how do you score points in attack? Create and convert uncontested scoring opportunities. How do you create those opportunities? It's typically going to be by having more time, because when you have more time, you're more likely to do things with accuracy and come up with correct solutions to problems, detect patterns that are there, and not be misled into picking up ones that don't exist. And how do you create the space that gives you the time to do that? Well, you do that via force, speed, or misdirection, or a combination thereof. And then obviously in defense, you're trying to shut down all of that stuff by doing the opposite. And then you say, okay, well, how do you leverage force, speed, misdirection to create space? Well, misdirection is basically the OODA loop. So you're trying to get your opponent to create a model of reality that doesn't exist, so that they're basically reading a script for a story that is not the case. So if we just do it like a super simple version, if I approach you as the ball carrier and you're defending, and I have a perfectly symmetrical body shape with the ability to push off the left leg or the right leg, and I don't have the ball tucked under one arm, you don't know where I'm going to go. So I know, you don't know, and that means that you're having to play catch up and process information from a disadvantage. Or you can say, okay, if you got 2 left feet, you can't do that. How can you use force? And that's when you get into like the weight training and body mass and stuff like that. And then when it gets to speed, you're basically, again, physical stuff, or technical physical. How do you increase the rate of displacement, also known as sprinting? So then what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn rugby into a system, and understand that there's a whole bunch of factors that contribute to the stuff that you want to get out of the end, which is points differential. And the likelihood is that within a given system, there's going to be one of those variables that is the most glaring limitation of performance, and that your job as the coach is to, 1, identify it with like diagnostic testing, 2, to have a good idea of how to address that limitation with an intervention, and then 3, to see it through to completion, to remove it, and then basically run that test again, because it's like, is it Medusa? You cut off a snake and then 2 pop up. Same thing, or like whack-a-mole in rugby. You get rid of a limitation, and guess what? Now you have a new limitation, and you have to go train it again. So if you're a true high performance coach or sports coach, you're going to have that 30,000 foot view where you're interested in every aspect of performance and what you can do to address those limitations. And if you're a physical preparation coach, it's pretty much going to be speed of movement. That's all strength and conditioning coaches do, is speed of movement in one form or another. And you're trying to come up with physical training interventions to increase that. And the disappointing thing about that is you can do a great job of that, but if the limiting factor lies outside of the physical, they're still going to be shit.
Yeah. And that's a lot of people, right? I used to get videos a lot when I was working with like a lot of younger players and players in the US as well, that they'd send me their game film and say, look how much I lack my fitness. And they would be running like solidly for the 80 minutes, but just in the complete wrong places.
Yeah.
And it's like, your problem isn't a fitness problem. For sure. Go on.
What we lack fitness is really the interaction of like 20 different things, most of which have nothing to do with physiology.
It's like when they say that the All Blacks are the fittest team in the world because they always score so many tries in the last 10, 15 minutes of a game. But it's like, yes, they look like they're the fittest, but they've been working so much or so less hard compared to every other team in the world to reach that 65 minutes, so they can just carry on. And that's more why they end up scoring. Same thing for Exeter Chiefs. Like, if you bully a team and they can just hang on by one fingernail and for 60 minutes, like that last 20 minutes when they actually do break, you're not more fit. You're just playing the same game at a higher level.
Well, as well, it's if there's parity between the teams for a decent chunk of the game, it isn't because necessarily they're of equal fitness. What it is like the more dominant team is taking their time to figure out tactically what the best way to capitalize on the last 15 minutes is going to be. So it's exactly what you said.
Well, so far you've done a horrible job of doing the Kneesovertoes style, Poliquin style marketing, of making this like nice and simple for everyone to just take away one. I guess so. I was expecting your answer to be that not enough people did tibia raises or whatever it is that the guy does. But yeah, that's the reality of strength and conditioning. Is it's really, really fucking nuanced, and even then, even if you get everything right, it's still limited in what it does. So I guess with your time,
if people want to market it like that, I think it's if you can market like, if you do A, B is going to be the result. Either you don't see the reality of training in sport for what it is, and that's not good, or you do, and you purposefully mislead people as to what the solutions to that are, and that's also not good. So I pretty much am not going to position myself and market like that, just because I still want to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's still enough people that are intrigued at that stuff. Like James Smith is still well sought out after. That's the thinker James Smith, not the James Smith, the not life coach English guy that's got really popular.
Yeah, he is doing a fortune. I have a friend who's friendly with him, and it's ridiculous how much he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, and again, he's saying pretty good messages, to be fair to him. But more the point is that the nuance of what James the Thinker Smith gets into, it's so good, but it's so like leveled and like not inconclusive almost, that it's like I remember watching his video, like I can't remember which video it was he was doing, but I remember watching it in my early 20s, a video of him being standing in front of a whiteboard, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, this guy's overthinking everything. And it was only a couple of years I came back to this video. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is actually one of the most well thought out, brilliant ideas I've ever watched.
Mate, I was at a seminar of his in 2012, and they did like a full day, and the amount of people that dropped off after lunch, they just couldn't handle it. Yeah.
But that's when you really want to go all the way into the matrix, I guess. He is.
Oh yeah, listen, funnily enough, I'm doing a long form course at the moment for excuse the plug, for strength and conditioning coaches that it's going to be released in a couple of months. But I wrote the problem solving module for the course, and one of the things that we talk about in the module is the Cynefin framework. So you have chaos, complex problems, complicated problems, and simple problems. And what happens is you tend to go clockwise through that model. So the first time you see you're in a new environment, you're like, I have no fucking clue what to do, and you try to establish order, and then you're like, well, okay, now that there's some order, I'm working in the complex domain. So everything affects everything in unpredictable ways. Sometimes you have to test and evolve and come up with solutions. And then if you can, it doesn't happen in sport, but if you can exert enough control, it becomes a complicated problem. So there's lots of moving variables, but ultimately there is a correct answer and you have to find it. And then eventually it's simple, you know, oh, we got the formula, this is how we solve it. And one of the warning signs of that framework is when you move clockwise, the ultimate form of arrogance is to take a complex or chaotic problem and attempt to solve it with a simple solution. And they call it dropping off the cliff. And then you find yourself in chaos again. And certainly there's going to be that, you know, in the early stages of your career, you think, oh, you know, increase squat, increase vertical jump, increase speed, collect check. And then you see everything for what it is, and then you get a little bit more order out of it, and you think, oh, okay, maybe I do know what I'm doing. And it's just it's a never-ending thing of going between those different quadrants.
Yeah, it's amazing. You do BJJ as well, so it's like one of those things. It's like you see this encompassed all the time in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You just think, oh, pass the guard, get to side control, get to mount, maybe take the back or choke. That's it. And then you realize once you start to, like, the more you develop a game, you realize, Jesus Christ, there's so many different routes and so many different things that are going on. And they try and simplify, and then they just show you another submission. It's like, well, I'm never going to use this. I'd much rather just practice the whole systems instead. Trying to simplify it and quantify it is what people really want. That's why like the Bronco test is so popular, because they think that the teams that have the best Broncos are going to be the best players. You want to touch on why that's such a terrible fucking test? Actually, because I've done enough, and I've actually come under a lot of scrutiny, and people say, well, Bowden Barrett and Richie McCaw are really good at it.
Big fucking deal.
Oh.
Why do we test? Why do we test?
We test to find out how much. Well, you're asking the wrong guy, because I've recently done a podcast why most testing is a waste of time. But
okay, so you test in order to have some kind of predictive value as to the sport. So testing
to quantify something that you want to improve, or that
so for example,
game.
You as an owner of a sports organization can't go out and train every kid in the world and just train 500,000 kids and pick the best 22, 23 and put them out on game day. So you don't have the resources. So what you have to do is identify who has the most talent for the sport, so that you can concentrate your resources into those and, produce a winning squad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you run testing, or you run tests that have some kind of positive or negative correlation, or some kind of significant relationship to the outcome of the sport. And if you can't measure the outcome of the sport because it's a complex sport like rugby, you're going to use surrogates of the sport.
Right.
And basically you say, okay, if you're good at this test, you're going to be good at the sport. So we're going to test it. And then as a coach, what you're looking to do is to validate interventions and say, okay, we know that this is an important metric for the sport. And if we do X intervention, we get Y result. And that's why we're going to measure it. So if you just approach it from that philosophical argument that if we go full circle and say, all right, okay, how do you win at rugby? Within the physical domain, it is going to be adding intensity to the execution of sporting skill to achieve a tactical outcome, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't necessarily the ability to sustain a sub-maximal effort that distinguishes one player from another. No. It's who can be the most powerful, the most explosive, the most fast, the most frequently for the duration of the game.
Yeah.
So
and within 5 to 10 seconds
that is going to be
time.
more of a, if that.
Yeah.
And basically,
that's
if you look at the, if you look at the time motion data of the sport, it's basically going to be, I think it's like 2-to-1 statical contact efforts to sprint efforts for the forwards, and then it's kind of flipped for the backs. And most of those are going to be 2 or 3 seconds, and then the distribution is probably going to be like 1 effort every 45 seconds for the forwards, and it's going to be 1 every 60 to 90 seconds for the backs. Now, with that said, there's going to be some submaximal running, but guess what? Submaximal running just earns you the right to be in the right place to do the stuff that matters. So if you want to smoke the Bronco test, go out and take the cross country team, and they'll kill it, and they're going to be terrible at rugby. So if you have that kind of philosophical argument, you say, right, this is the stuff that matters, then you need to have a test that replicates those demands. Because specificity says if we have, an event or action or a movement in the game, the more closely we can replicate that with exercise design and classification, the more specific it's going to be, the more predictive value it's going to have. So you need to develop a test that accurately replicates the demands of the game and measure people according to that, rather than taking a game in which it rewards very high intensity or maximal explosive efforts on an intermittent basis, and then trying to use as your yardstick a submaximal test of 4 minutes running. 4 or 5. I don't know what's a good score. I never use it, but
I think it's like I think under 4 minutes is like, or around the bottom end of 4 minutes is really good. I can't even remember what the distance is. But I mean, if you want to use it as like a prescriptive tool, you say, okay, we can infer maximal aerobic speed from the Bronco test. We can use maximal aerobic speed to program mass intervals. Okay, but there's still probably easier ways to do it and better ways to do it without
a
whole lot of less
shouldn't be measuring your cock by it.
Yeah, for sure. Hi guys, I just wanted to jump in here to tell you that if you're enjoying this podcast and you want to become a better athlete, then you can go ahead and visit rugby-muscle.com and pick up any of our free goodies. That is the 50 free rugby conditioning sessions, the Physique Nutrition Crash Course video series, the supplement guide, and newly added is a macro calculator. Yes, that's right, a macro calculator where you will be able to work out your protein, carbs, fat, and calories that you should be eating on a daily basis to give you a guide as to where to start your diet from. This will help in conjunction with your 50 free conditioning sessions to build you out a decent little plan that will enable you to take control of your training and use effective training and nutrition to become a better athlete. All of that stuff and more can be found at rugby-muscle.com or rugby-muscle.com/macros for the macro breakdown. I could get into like why we need to do like so much more zone 2 for the aerobic stuff, but we'll save that for. Do you even know why the Bronco became such a popular test? Because it wasn't like it's only within the last like 6 or so. Yeah, it's the same reason that people love to say that the All Blacks love to sweep the changing rooms, and those are the 2 reasons why they're the best team in the world.
Bullshit.
Not because
we used to take the bags off the bus all the time. We used to clean the change rooms all the time, and they still pumped us twice a year.
Yeah.
You know why they're so good at rugby?
Yeah.
Money
and
no
culture.
competition from other sports, and just ruthless competition. They are no higher quality human beings than any other country. There is a ton of alcohol and sexual misbehavior in New Zealand that never sees the light of day because they're the All Blacks.
Yeah. Oh, I know that. When you've got like all of the youth athletes that like all their best athletes, like they're not doing weightlifting, they're not doing any other sport. Well, not obviously football is the one that takes 99. Well, both versions of football, right, in the US and the UK, take up the vast majority of all the best athletes.
Yeah,
and then they've got no competition for that, so they take all of those, and you're even better off. Like people would choose to be, if you're looking at it from an economical sort of situation, you'd even be better off in a League 2, League 1 sort of Premiership, professional football team than you would be in a potentially being a rugby player.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and that's why they get the best athletes.
Yep, but people don't want to acknowledge that. They want to look at the end product and not work as far back as possible, but maybe just take one step back. Well, we saw that they did some special warm up. We got to do that.
I mean, that's the real thing that you realize as well. You say, oh, okay, if sporting success is going to be, a product of the best population with the best training and the best everything else, and probably the biggest determining factor of that can be the best talent. It comes down to culture and money. So you can have the world's best strength and conditioning coach, but if you're just training people that look like me, you're going to suck. Whereas if you have enough money and enough competition, you can basically buy your way to a championship.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's funny that people just, the conclusions that people draw that are really so like short-sighted. I always talk about like just getting youth athletes is like easiest way, because it's easier for that to teach them the sport at a younger age and all this. And I always use the example for rugby in the US of the FIFA World Cup in 1994, which is why the MLS is actually the decent shape that it's in now compared to any other sport that's tried to quote unquote break America, is because they actually started with the kids. Like soccer mum became a phrase because of what happened in the 90s. And actually, they finally, they didn't make the last World Cup, but they've actually got a infrastructure that could support a national team, that actually can compete on the world stage.
Well, and what I think as well is the supposed weaknesses of America relative to other countries are actually strengths. So Title IX legislation plus the college system is probably why the women have done so well for the US national team, because they're 100%. Getting opportunities that don't exist for women elsewhere. But it's come to the detriment of the men, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. We could get into that, but I more want to go back to the we're not going to go to probably many of the questions that we laid out, but I'm fine with that. It's all good, mate. We're talking about more important or just as important stuff that I'm more fascinated with. So it's fine, but to that level, right? So we're talking about the limitations of strength and conditioning and all that sort of stuff. How many, can you, and you don't have to name names, but I'd like to hear one name, like players that kind of sucked in the gym, sucked at S&C, but just on the field, that you worked with personally. So don't just say Andy Good, that sucked in the gym, sucked in S&C, but actually when it came to performing, they were like outstanding.
Leonardo Senatore, he's retired now, so I'll say his name. The same year that he turned in a man of the match performance against Australia and we won our first championship game, his max back squat was 130 kilos at 105 kilos body weight.
What position was he?
He was number 8.
Think about it. Right. So that's so important for people to listen and understand. Like getting attached to weights and stuff is so, obviously they're listening to a rugby strength and conditioning podcast. So, they're going to be a bit biased to liking a bit of weights, but understanding the limitations that has is really, really, really important. So that's why
he was a smoker too, and he liked to get pissed. Listen, you do need to be strong. You do need to have certain outputs in order to hang as an international rugby player, but the barrier to entry is much, much lower than people think. And once you've cleared that barrier, spending additional time and energy trying to pump those numbers up, if you lack or if you have a limiting factor elsewhere within the system, is a fool's errand. So I'll tell you one thing about Leo. He was a awesome rugby player, and mentally you couldn't touch him. Mm-hmm. Absolute alpha male. I had another guy on that team, Horacio Aguja, probably in the region of 100 mils over 8 sites body fat. So I personally I personally witnessed him in a World Cup year in camp. His breakfast was 2 slices of white bread, buttered. He took packets of sugar from the coffee machine and poured them on the bread and ate that, and then a glass of orange juice. And this is a guy who, when he was a kid, he had one leg, I think it was like 2 centimeters longer than the other, and they had to break his pelvis and all this kind of stuff to get his legs. So his nickname in Spanish was the limp. So if you look at what he did, I want to say he had 60 caps. He went to 3 World Cups, and David Flatman said that he was pound for pound the strongest hitter in the Premiership.
Jeez, yeah.
So it goes to show.
And again, this is sort of the quantifiable element taken out, right? In a way, it was a traditional quantifiable method, should I say?
Exactly. Yeah. The reason we lean so heavily on those physical metrics is because they're easy to measure.
Yeah.
And they're
100%.
easy to, for the most part, easy to improve the training. So when you're hinging you're justifying your existence and hinging your self-worth and your ability to improve certain numbers, you're going to pick the ones that are easiest to improve. So you probably can quantify fairly objectively stuff like psychological qualities that contribute to mental toughness, like technical understanding. You can probably rank athletes if you ask good enough questions and try and come up with like robust enough processes to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, really hard to do, and it's really, really hard to improve that stuff with training, because most strength coaches, if you had a debate and you said, if you had to pick between a big back squat or lightning fast, they'll pick fast, right?
Right.
So why is it that we justify our existence with strength numbers as opposed to speed numbers? And the answer is that you can push up somebody's 1RM 50% in a year if they've got a low training age. Whereas if you make somebody 15% faster over a career, you're probably one of the world's best.
And not many people notice, like on the front end.
It's really hard to do. It's really hard.
Yeah. I guess that kind of throws the question out of like, so you've worked with, elite S&C all over the world, and you've, you named a few people here that, like, when you talk about elite S&C, the numbers they're putting up and the way they live their lifestyle is probably a shock to some of the people that are listening to this. But like, how much more common is that versus, the guy that squats triple body weight or even 2.5 body weight, but isn't very good on the field? Do they still exist in a professional environment?
Absolutely.
Don't name names on that one.
In the pros, no.
Yes.
What you'll tend to find is that it's been very, very, very rare that any athlete in any position of the teams that I've worked with, that the best athlete in that position was also putting up the best numbers in even in speed or explosive strength or in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't match up that way. When you do tend to find that, it tends to be a world-class individual, because they're literally like across the board, like a 9 to a 10 out of 10. What you do find all the time at the lower levels is guys that either naturally just crush it in the physical stuff, and they're quite poor athletes, into like games players, and they don't necessarily want to expose their weakness. They want to double down on their strengths and do what they're good at. And then you've got a lot of people at the lower levels that mistakenly think that just because an elite level athlete is bigger, stronger, faster, fitter than them, that bridging the gap to be more like that is going to be the difference, when in reality it's just they happen to be a way better player of that sport than you, and they happen to be bigger, stronger, faster, fitter.
Yeah, but and that being the better player of the sport allowed them to have the opportunity to then refine everything else to get that much bigger, faster, stronger, fitter, etc. and then they can
Well,
keep
it's,
working on
for
that.
the sports teams that are selecting those guys, it's free money. So if you're the coach and you say, oh, you want a guy that's a masterful player of the sport who's, again, looks like me, 5'10", 180, slow twitch king, or do you want somebody who's a masterful player of the sport who's 6'4", 110 kilos, and can jump out the gym? You were like, oh, give me the second player.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's a causative factor. It's just free money.
Yeah, 100%. It's something that I think a lot of people miss. What you said is the key, though. It's like there's so many different areas that you just have to pay the price of entry, right? Be big enough, be strong enough, be fast enough, and then solve the situations that we spoke about before, however suits you and your team as a player, or if you're the coach, figure out what your team is, how your team would best go about solving those problems.
Yeah, and I mean, not to pick on the NFL, but the NFL is littered with physically outstanding individuals that have been tempted to come over and have a crack at the NFL, and they've all failed for that reason.
Yeah. It's the like Tom. It's always funny that I see Tom Brady selling his TB12 shit, and you just think, you think he's the best player? Like, he's won so many. Like, just even argue why he's won so many Super Bowls. You don't even have to actually say, like, you could even argue. I wouldn't make that argument, but you could have the argument that doesn't mean that he's necessarily the best player. He's just one player in a team of so
player.
many.
What he is, he's the player that experiences the smallest drop from his best day to how he can execute under intense psychological pressure.
Yeah.
So if you look at like who's the most talented, or like clutch, who's the most naturally talented QB in the league right now? Maybe it's Patrick Mahomes. Or no, it's probably Lamar Jackson, right?
Yeah.
But Lamar Jackson, if you put him under enough pressure, has yet to respond like you would hope that a Tom Brady would.
Right.
So Tom Brady isn't necessarily the most talented, has never been. But if you put him under psychological pressure, he's not going to experience the drop that the others do.
Yeah. Well, I also think that if you put him under psychological pressure, he can just check to his right, see Rob Gronkowski, and just throw him the ball. It makes it a lot easier. I lost you for a sec there.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, good. I just thought I'd insulted you as a Tom Brady fan or something there by attributing some of his success to the players around him.
No, I'm in the vicinity of the Washington football team. That's definitely not racist.
Fair enough. But yeah, so I think like what you've already said is like a lot of a really, really, really different approach. Like it's like you said, you're reading mental models, and it is that, like, is it first principles where you just break everything down all the way, like you tear everything up. You don't rely on anything that's been done before. Like, it allows you to see the game and to see strength and conditioning, or just life, but in this instance, strength and conditioning, fitness work, etc., from a completely different light.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why you can, if you adopt that kind of like mindset and talk about it publicly, why it can raise an eyebrow, is because if you break it down to first principles and you say, well, actually, the point of the game is to score more points than the other team, and you follow it through to its logical conclusion, in theory, you can have an athlete that gets, let's take an extreme example. We recruit an athlete from track and field, and they'll get slower, weaker, less explosive. Probably their body comp will go a little bit worse. They'll be a much, much better rugby player, and they'll get much, much closer to the objective of first principles.
Yeah.
But if you were to advocate for that as a strength and conditioning coach, they'd look at you like you had two heads.
Yeah. And then, and then the testing comes into it, like, oh my God, they scored worse on the Bronco. and then you get fired because you've got to quantify your job. It is such a difficult approach.
Oh, dude, I mean, listen, I worked with a guy in Japan. He was an absolute prick, and he ended up getting fired. And I'll give you two examples, right? He decided, right, we're going to do a 1K test, which is basically you just do shuttles up and down the pitch. Reamed me, like literally.
Hold on, sorry,
goes,
I lost
office now.
I lost you for a sec. Go back to the.
Oh, okay.
You're at 1K. You're talking about the 1K test. Sorry.
Yeah, so he's decided for me because he knows strength and conditioning better than me. We're going to do the 1K test. So it has to be a kilometer of shuttles up and down the pitch. So I think it's like there and back 5 times. And this is how we're going to measure performance. And if the numbers aren't good enough, you're going to hear about it. And basically, we had a guy who at that point was scoring 2 tries a game. This is another great games player, liked to drink, like to smoke. Was not physically gifted, but he was awesome at rugby. And he got 10 seconds slower. And this head coach was like, my office now. And he tried to ream me over this. And I'm like, he's like, oh, this guy got slower. And I'm like, yes, he's scoring 2 tries a game. And his best score was done at the height of preseason in the summer, nice weather on stiff ground when we weren't playing games. And now we've tested, the mid-season break. It's November. It's cold. It's wet. He can't be bothered. He's got a stiff ankle and he's asthmatic and he likes to smoke. And it's just like, of course he got 10 seconds slower.
But he scored 2 tries a game.
Exactly. And then, I had another conversation with the same guy. We had a guy who's in his late 20s who had gone to the Olympics to play sevens for the national team. He'd come back, and over the course of my first year, in his late 20s, he increased his vertical jump by 3 inches. And the feedback that I got from the head coach was, he doesn't squat 185 kilos anymore. That's not good. And I said, yeah, but he's more explosive. His vertical jump's gone up 3 inches. Well, I want him to be stronger. And I said, well, you're starting to ask for things that, compete with our nerve. I said, do you want him to be strong or do you want him to be explosive? And he said, well, I want him to be both. I said, okay, he'll squat. It was 180 kilos. So I spent the next year making sure that he could squat 185 kilos. And I sent the video to the head coach. And what do you think happened to his vertical jump?
Went down.
There you go. So if you're a winger, do you think that's good or bad?
Depends how many times you get the ball on the wing with 40 meters of grass ahead of you, and then you get a barbell on your back, and for no reason. And, yeah. Well,
you could say, he's going to be more dominant in contact. Well, the whole point of that position is to avoid contact at all costs by being fast and evasive.
Yeah, and I don't know who's doing a barbell back squat in contact to begin with. Like, again, going back to grappling. Yeah. It's a lot more complex than who's the strongest. A lot more complex. Yeah.
And the thing is, contact skill, like you said, there's a huge tactical and technical component to contact. And then when it comes to the physical qualities of contact, if you actually look at contact in slow motion, these actions are way more isometric and about resisting deformation than it is about moving a load at slow speed. It's basically, can you just create whole body tension for a fraction of a second, let the other guy wrap around you, and then you relax.
Yeah.
And, that is 1, hard to quantify, and 2, it doesn't necessarily transfer from, max back squat.
And it's also like, it's so highly skilled to that element as well. I've been playing with my coaching philosophies and been thinking about literally breaking rugby completely into 2 separate pursuits, which is the close contact situation and then the broader game, because those things are so different. It's ridiculous.
They are, and the principles are fairly flipped. So if you, for example, say that the creation of space is how you assert dominance in field sports. And then in contact, it's actually the shutting down of space, because you're not, to manipulate somebody else's body, you're probably not going to do it holding onto them at arm's length.
Right.
you're actually going to have to shut that space down and to create leverage. So it's you're absolutely right. It's two completely different skill sets.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've got into perfect timing as the cafe you're in has got pretty busy.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. This has been a really good in-depth S&C chat style of thing, like to sort of slightly not even open Pandora's box, but just peel the lid off just a little bit, just to give people a peek inside, I think. Before I let you plug again the strength and conditioning course that you're going to be releasing, I do want to ask you, and this is a question I've been asking every guest so far for like quick answers, but you can spend your time answering this because I'm sure you've actually probably thought about it. Is what does you can choose either strength and conditioning in general or rugby strength and conditioning, or just rugby. But what does it look like in 20 years' time?
For me or for the sport?
For the sport.
We're going to see a lot less emphasis on pure physical outputs. It's already started to happen in the sport. If you look at, just like Super Rugby, the players are lighter and faster now than they were 10 years ago. And I think it isn't necessarily that trend isn't going to continue. They'll probably kind of like level off. But then my hope is that the criteria that players are evaluated on is going to get much more about, the ability to execute a tactical technical game plan, because there's only so many times that you see physically big, strong, powerful, fit teams lose to teams like the All Blacks. We keep bringing them up, but the biggest team in World Rugby is probably Georgia or Tonga. The fittest team in Rugby 7 should probably be Kenya. The fastest team in World Rugby should be the States, based on their track and field culture. And it's clearly not helping them.
Yeah. Interesting. And then what's one song everyone needs to put on their gym playlist?
I mean, I really like to flip the script and go with the psychological warfare, because in college sport there's a lot of social media posturing and
no way.
So and so school has got them out of bed they're out of bed at 4 a.m. They're doing this. I remember seeing a school that did a squat workout on the field at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they'd like taken the squat racks out to the field and brought in a DJ. And
Jesus.
Yeah, when everyone else is zigging, I tend to zag and try and upset the apple cart. So I've in a couple of summers ago put up a video of the guys dancing to "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" by Cyndi Lauper in the gym, and I said on social media, I said, just remember, if we beat you, this is how we were training in the summer.
Yes, that's so good. I've always been. I think again, this is a James Smith influence for sure, but it's one of those things where it's like psychological warfare, or what about you just be better? Like,
hey, that's mental toughness. Nobody ever questions the mental toughness of the victor.
It's so weird. It's so funny. Cool. And then like we've got a lot of trainers that listen to this podcast, so that want to get, maybe they're in S&C or they want to start working with more athletes. I know you have Strength Coach Network, so where can people go and follow that? And then this up and coming course that you've got to be released.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to be through Strength Coach Network. So the platform itself of Strength Coach Network is a monthly subscription. So we have about 200 hours of video lectures. From the rules are you have to be working at the elite level, and you have to feed your family with the results that you get from training athletes. We have members from over 30 different countries that interact on the forums and share ideas and do Q&As and stuff like that. We have a career development forum, because as you know, it's not enough that you're a good practitioner. You have to play the game and be strategic about how you're going to get from where you are to where you want to be in terms of the profession. And we have a whole bunch of other resources on there, like cheat sheets, live Q&As, all that kind of stuff. And the course is just going to be an extension of that. It's going to be a little bit more formalized, a bit more of a structured curriculum. And yeah, we're excited to drop it.
I love it. Yeah, it's so worth it. If you are a coach and you have any, even if you're like a guy that just likes to get into the nitty gritty of strength and conditioning as like a hobby, it's so worth it for the platform compared to like all the other, like how much you pay for seminars or how much you pay for any other certification. Like Strength Coach Network is definitely the way to go.
I'm giving it away.
Awesome, mate. And what about following you on your socials if they don't already?
Just search for Rugby Strength Coach. That's that's my personal one. So if you like pictures of the Japanese emperor or stuff that I'm doing personally, that's the place to go. And then if you just want the education stuff, it's Strength Coach Network.
Cool, mate. Well, this has been great to have you on, and I enjoyed this because again, it's one of those things where like you go down and you think they're going to be really easy and just question and answers, but everything and is so nuanced that this is sort of the only way to do it. And it's not as easy as ABC, but the more we can try and like whittle it down and create a framework for that, the better. And I hope people got a good understanding and can take away a lot from this.
Appreciate you having me on. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate. All right. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed that episode of the Rugby Muscle Podcast, then I've got a quick little request and a potential prize giveaway for you if you do said request. All I want you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and type up a 5-star review. Just your general opinions of the podcast would be great feedback, but also helps us reach higher rankings, get more exposure, allow me to attract more guests and devote more time to developing a better all-around podcast experience for you. All you have to do, once again, is go and give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast service you use. Let me know that you've got it, and then every single week I'll be selecting one review to give away a free prize. That free prize will be either 1 free month of Team Rugby Muscle, that's our world-class strength and conditioning program app delivered directly to your phone, or if that doesn't interest you, then we've got 1 free consultation where I'll go over your training program, your nutrition, and advise you how to best plan for your goals. Even if none of those things interest you, it's still doing me a solid and helping the podcast grow by going and giving us a 5-star review. There's no real excuse. It takes like 1 minute and that helps the show out exponentially. So I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you in the next one. All right.